All right. So this is the quote he's talking about. Now, moreover, although the 12 and Pelasgian Argos inhabited Alis, Aleppo, and Trachis possessed Pythias and Hellas, the home Hellas, home of the fair woman, were called Myrmidons, Hel Hellenes, and Achaeans, right? There, he's not saying that Pelasgians are Hellenic, right? He's saying that people that lived in Pelasgian Argos were called Myrmidons, Hellenes, and Achaeans. And this is because Deucalion and his sons with Helen conquered this area, right? So this is Delphi Classic, works of Homer. So let me go to Diodorus Siculus, right? Complete, complete works of Diodorus, right? All right, so this is about Crete, right? The first inhabitants of the island were known as Eteocretans, and many generations after them, Pelasgians. The third people who were told were the Dorians. Now, the Dorians are actually Hellenes, right? Under the leadership of Tectomus, son of Doris, right? So Pelagians came to Crete before Helen, the Greeks. Larger known Doris was gathered from the regions of Olympus, right? Four people came to Greeks, intermixed with Cretans, and we're told they're a collection of barbarians, right? So let's go more sec. Let me see if it says it here. Secrops. Yes. Okay, it probably says it in Herodotus, right? So Cecrops was a king of Athens, but he was a Pelasgian. Cigarettes. So let's look up Pelasgia. The first. Okay, this is a little bit after this anyway. Now, after he talks about Crete, he speaks about Lesbos, the islands where inhabitants since ancient time. The first people who sees it, that while it was still uninhabited, was the Pelasgians. The following manner: Xanthus, son of Triopas, was king of Pelasgian Argos, seized a portion of Lycia, whom they would outside became king over the Pelasgians that accompanied him. But later he crossed over to Lesbos, which was uninhabited, and divided the land among the folk. The name of the island had formerly been called Issa Palastia, after the people who had settled it. And seven generations later, after the flood of Deucalion had taken place in which the mankind had perished, it had come to pass that Lesbos was laid desolate by the deluge of water, right? So this is before Deucalion's time. During Deucalion's time, a mass flood happened, and his son Helen, and his other sons conquered Greece. After the events of Macaris of the island, the Macaris son of Zeus, Hesiod, certain in Newport state that was the native of Alonis, now called Issa, and now called Achaea, right? So Ias, the mainland of Greece of Achaea, was actually called Ias, right? But when the Hellenes conquered it later on, sometime they called it Achaea, right? So now, after this account and Dionysus among the Greeks, Linus was the first to discover the different rhythms of song. When Cadmus brought from Phoenicia the letters, they are called Linus, given to the first transfer to the Greek letters, give the name to each character, its shapes. Now the letters of Krupp were called Phoenicians because they were brought to the Greeks from Phoenicians, but as single letters to the Pelasgians were the first to make use of this transferred character, so they were called Pelasgic, right? So the Greeks adopted it, but Pelasgians used it first, right? It remains to speak that the Minotaur was slain by Theseus, right? In order, when we complete our cousin Theseus, we revert to another account and Tectimus, the son of Doris, the son of Helen, the son of Deacon, sailed to Crete and sailed to Crete with Aeolians and Pelasgians and became king of the island, right? So when obviously, as I showed you, um, the Pelasgians lived there before the Deucalion, right? Because those 7 generations after, right? So then Deucalion and his sons conquered, right? So it's mentioning his son Doris of, uh, it's mentioning his grandson Doris of Helen, the son of Deucalion. They sailed to Crete with the Pelasgians they conquered, right? So which would make sense anyway, right? People always kind of used native local units as their mercenaries and stuff like that. Not and became king of the island. And then it talks about marrying marrying the daughter of Croesus, begat Aristeus. When he was king of in Crete, Zeus, as they say, carried off a rope from Phoenicia, blah blah blah, right? Laid with her begat 3 sons, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Serpedon, right? So now, hold on. The Chironis, blah blah. Wherein had nature in the midst. Chironis and the Carians who dwelt there, settling in the land, and so divided into 5, founding the city which they named themselves after, right? So, so, so this is at a time when Carians started found a place after themselves, right? And this is way far back during the time of Innoxious, king of the Argives. So this is very, very early in the Pelasgian times, right? And Cernus was an island off North Africa around Libya. Uh, Cernus, right? So Triopas, one of the sons of Helios and Rhodos, was fugitive because of his murders of his brother Tenegus to the Cheronesius, right? And once he had been purified by the murder of Eleusis the king, he sailed to Thessaly and gave assistance as an ally to the sons of Deucalion, right? And with their aid, expelled from Thessaly the Pelasgians, right? So Triopas helped expel the Pelasgians from Thessaly with the Hellenes. Took from his part the plain of which called Dulcian when he cut the sacred grove of Demeter and used the wood to build the palace. For this reason, he incurred hatred of the natives, right? So Triopas, with the Triopas insulted the Pelasgians and the sacred tree of Demeter, right? And the Deucalions, the Hellenes, helped them do this, right? And incurred hatred for Pelasgian natives from Thessaly and put ashore together with peoples who sailed with him in the Taurios Synodus, right? Where he found the Triopium, as it was called after him, right? So this is reflecting the conquest of the Hellenes over the Pelasgians, right? They were not the same people. They kind of been conflated to be the same people after their descendants mixed, right? They're not the same people at all. Let's see. Uh, but now, the first tell Cretans, yeah, this is the same kind of quote, same quote. Oh, yeah, this I said this quote already. Now, okay, so All right, so this quote I'm not too familiar with, but since the Romans elected, so at this time of the Romans, when whoever was Publius Valerius Publicola, right, when he was alive, um, Pelasgians were still around, right, which is still inhabited by Pelasgians and the Lopes, right, and Simon took alongside the fleet, which was Byzantium, and putting in at the city, which was called Ilton, right? Have it for Pelasgians. Let me see. Okay, so, see. Okay, this. At the same time, Dionysus was besieging Rhegium. The Celts, who had their homes in the regions beyond the Alps, streamed through passes of great length and terror, and lay between the Apennine Mountains and the Alps, expelling the Tyrrhenians who dwelt there. And these, according to the sum, were colonists from the 12 cities of Tyrrhenia. But others state that before the Trojan War, Pelasgians fled from Thessaly to escape the flood of Deucalion's time and settled in this region, right? So the Hellenes conquered and kind of displaced the Pelasgian people in this area, Thessaly, right? Thessaly near Macedonia, and they fled all the way to Tyrrhenia near Italy. And at this time, the Celts divided the tribes known as Senones and laid the forest mountains, eager to move since the younger men made out to make a terror, and they might settle. Now they invaded Tyrrhenia, and being in number some of 30,000, they sacked the city. They sacked the territory of Clusini, right? Clusini, the this area that the Celts Clusini sacked, I think that's Etruscan territory, right? All right, so let's do it here. Okay, this is very important over here. When after the flood occurred in the days of Deucalion, Cadmus built the Cadmea, right? Cadmus is the one that brought the Phoenician letters to the Greeks that the Greeks use today, right? He built the Cadmea, which was called in his name. Uh, they came they came together there with a folk whom some call Spartoi because they had been gathered from all sides, and others the Thebagenes, because they were originally from Thebes, but they had been driven out and scattered by the flood, right? Be aware that be that as it may, these people then settled in the city, but later the Ancelians defeated them in war and drove them out, at a time which Cadmus and his followers were driven to Illyria, right? So the Ancelians defeated Cadmus and his followers, right? But as legends know it, he became king of Illyrians, right? And Ancelians were an Illyrian tribe. They were just a different Illyrian tribe. Later, Amphion and Zethus became masters of the site and built the lower city, as the first poets say, right? The inhabitants of this place were exiled the second time, for Polydorus, son of Cadmus, came back and was dissatisfied with the situation because of the misfortune had befallen Amphion in connection with the children. Next, when Polydorus' own descendants were kings, the whole country received the name Boeotia from Boetus, the son of Melanippe and Poseidon, and the rulers of the region, um, the Thebans, for the third time suffered exile. For the Ephagoni from Argos, who took the city by siege, the survivors of these were driven out, and took refuge in Alocomania and Mount Tilphotheum, right? But after the Argives had departed, they returned to their native city. After that, when the Thebans had gone to Asia for the Trojan War, those who were left behind were expelled along the rest of the Boeotians by Pelasgians, right? And were left behind, expelled. So, so the Pelasgians exiled these Thebans, right? Because they fought on the side of the Hellenes. Thereafter, they met with many misfortunes, only with difficulty in the fourth generations, according to the prophecy of the ravens, and they returned to Boeotia and reestablished Thebes. From that time, the city persisted nearly 800 years. The Thebans at the first become the leaders of their own people and later disputing the leadership of the Greeks until Alexander, son of Philip, captured the city by storm and destroyed it. Right? The Athenians, for example, rebuilt the greater part of the. Hold on. In the 12th year thereafter, Cassander lied in his desire for after obtaining the consent of the Boeotians, rebuilt the city. Those of Thebes survived. Many of the Greek cities shared in the resettlement, both because of their pity and misfortune, and unfortune, pity for the unfortunate, and because of the glory of the city. The Athenians, for example, rebuilt the greater part of the wall, and of the other Greeks, not alone from Greek itself, but from Sicily, Italy as well, erecting buildings to the ability, blah blah blah. Right? So, so this is more or less the same stuff. This is like dual text, right? So as you see, as you see, right? As you see, they're different. They're more or less different people, right? So this is just talking about how the traditions don't come from the Greeks; they come from Pelasgians, right? The Pelasgians came to settle in Athenian territory at a time when the Athenians became to be counted as Greek. As you probably saw, they were kind of displaced. They came back. So this is probably in reference to that when the the and our Pelasgian origin, right? So they're talking about some tradition about Hermes that came from Samothrace, and that's the Pelasgian origin. They ended up living alongside Athenians. The Athenians and lived on Samothrace. They got some knowledge from them. Things. Also, I know for a fact the original practice of the Pelasgians took only every sacrifice. Right? They're talking about the this, right? More example. Pelagians learned the names in Egypt. All the gods have arrived. Right? It was for the Pelagians that these things were subsequently passed on to the Greeks. Right? So a lot of these gods' names were carried from Egypt, and then he talks about some of these Greek gods that were passed from the Pelasgians, right? So Pelasgian. All right, so this is another Egyptian given the name the message now for I am conversant with the performance and a comprehensive grasp of their essence. It's hardly proper for me to betray for what is known about them. Likewise, they regard all the rites that are sacred to Demeter and are called the thesmophoria, right, by the Greeks. I will breathe not a word, and beyond what is legitimate to report. It was the daughters of Donis who brought the right from Egypt and taught it to the Pelasgian woman, right? So subsequently, in the wake of the ethnic cleansings of the Peloponnese by the Dorians, the knowledge of the Thesmophria was entirely eradicated, and it survived. It was due entirely due to their cadence, for they alone of the Peloponnesians avoided being uprooted, right? So this is further proof they're not the same people, that in fact um, the Greeks kind of did an ethnic cleansing of the area, right? They Hellenized the people, they ethnic cleansed them. I'm not sure if that could also incur, that means they did a genocide, right? In the violent sense, right? So, let's see. This is, I don't know, Greeks, like they have too much propaganda. They twist history. They twist what actual ancient Greeks people kind of say and claim. Let's see, too much. Okay, I'm a little all over the place. Meanwhile, first of all, there is another matter to discuss when the Pelasgians who abducted the Athenian woman from Baran drove the descendants of the Argonauts from Lemnos. The exiles set sail for Lacedaemon, where they camped at Mount Taygetus and lit a fire, right? The Lacedaemonians, when they saw this, they sent a messenger who came out there, and they had come from, we are the minions, they said. And the herald's question, we are descended from the heroes who sailed on the Argos and put in at Lemnos, where they fathered our line. After the Lacedaemonians, the Lacedaemonians are the Hellenic lineage, had listened to this account of the minion pedigree. I think that's correct, right? They sent a messenger to task us. Purpose of coming to the Lacedaemonians, why the messenger and asked the minions what the purpose of coming to Lacedaemonians. They had lit a fire, exiled Pelasgians, said the minions. Okay, so it's the minions. We have, these are two people. The Lacedaemonians are Hellenes. The minions are another people. I think trying to prove their Hellenic lineage, right? We came to the island of our fathers. Uh, Surely as we have actually to live here among, sharing the dues and the privileges. The Lacedaemonians, we were content to agree. The quest, the terms of the minions, what chiefly influenced them, obliging was in fact the son of Tendorus had sailed the Argo. And so they welcomed the minions and gained the plots of lands, the tribes, right? So minions, the Lacedaemonians accepted the minions as Hellenic, but the minions are not Pelasgians. They're not the same. They're trying to prove their Hellenic lineage to the Lacedaemonians. They accepted them. They accepted the fact that Pelasgians exiled them, and they are the line of Tenders. Right. So it it was from the same Otanes the distinctions chair became journalists to Megabesis, Byzantium, and Chalcedon, and he also commanded the ships from Lesbia. The Lesbians took the Lemnos Emerald, both of which were still inhabited by Pelasgians at the time, right? So Lesbos was Pelasgian, right? Meanwhile, as the Pythia was giving the Parians this oracle, Mithridates returned home from Paros and had set tongues of Athenians wagging his prominent critic, being Xanthippus, son of Arithron, right, who hauled him up front the people with a capital charge of having defrauded him. Mithridates himself, despite his presence in the court, laid out on litter, was prevented. Protrude state on his high, speaking in his own defense, and his friends did it for him, reminding him the court great detail of the battle that had been fought on Marathon and captured Lemnos. Now Mithridates had captured it and punished the Pelasgians and presented the island to the Athenians, right? Metalides is a Greek, right? The people were sufficiently won over to spare him in death. At the time, Metalides, which is the son of Simon, had came to seize control. How was it that Mithridates, the son of Simon, came to seize the control of Lemnos? There was a time when Pelasgians lived in Attica until they were forced out by the Athenians, and whether it was legitimate act or crime. This is more recent. This isn't so far back, right? But they're still kind of having problems with each other, right? And as far as a legitimate act or crime, I cannot say. Beyond reporting, Hecator, son of Hesagender, for instance, the Athenians reports began eye of the Mount Hymettus, which they call themselves, what they themselves had been given to the Pelagians as a home in exchange. Right, so that they drove the Pelagians out, gave no pretext for doing it, right? So let's say, see, alongside them, they drove out the Pelasgians because Pelasgians who were settled on Mount Hymettus had turned delinquent, blah, 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 right? So they're still kind of having problems even after the conquest. Listen, right? So back in those days, Athenians were like all the Greeks, having no domestic slaves, so it was their own daughters, so unstrained. Were Pelasgians in sexual appetite, contempt for the Athenians, right? Plotting, blah, blah, blah. Right, so this is after the conquest, but they're kind of kicking each other back and forth, in and out. So yeah, the Pelagians actually did some pretty foul stuff to the Greeks, right? The Pelagians bundled a large number of their women into their ships, headed back with them on Lemnos, where the women were kept as concubines. Their bellies were forever being made to swell with the offspring. The offspring of the woman then instructed in both Attic dialect and the customs of Athens. As a result, their children refused anything to do with their children of Pelasgian women, right? This is how much Greeks and Pelasgian people hated each other, right? So at a certain times, right? So to say that Greeks and Hellenes were the same is just insanely false, right? They mixed with each other, and they also kind of really hated each other to the core, right? The Hellenes ethnic cleansed them and everything. The Pelasgians were raping their women, right? So when the Pelagian realized what was going on, right? And then the Pelasgian and even the woman, the children of these Attic women, um, as a result, refused any to do with children of Pelasgian women, right? So as one hit by, as a result, were one of them to be hit by Pelasgian child, all the others would join forces to his rescue, right? So this is how crazy it was, right? When the Pelagian religion was going on, they debated on what to do about it. They moved on the issue over. The terrible realization began to dawn on them. Athenian children were already set on discriminating against those children whose mothers were legally married in favor of their own kind, were wasting no time in their attempts to gain the upper hand. What on earth would they get up to reaching manhood? Accordingly, the Lemnians decide that their best of course would be to kill the children born of Athenian womb. This they duly did, and the murder of the mothers of the children too, right? So, you kind of like, I don't, this is why Greek propaganda is so bad, right? Like you could read all the stuff that's going on between these people. Look at this, right? Following the murder by the Pelasgians, the women bear no fruit, blah, blah, blah. The Pythia So it was famished and diminished by childlessness. Pelagians sailed to Delphi to beg the release of from the evil condition which they had found themselves. The Pythia ordered them to pay the Athenians whatever penalty. Right. So right, they had all this squabble. Right. From Lydia, the army as was on its way to the river Caucasus and the land of Mysia, from the Caucasus, keeping Mount Caney on its left, on continued way to Artinus, the city of Saturn, from bypassing Artromatium and the Pelasgian foundation of Atandrus. It crossed the plain of Thebes, right? And reaching Ida, it went by the left-hand side of the mountain in the land of Ilium. This is another Pelasgian area. Pelasgian foundation of Atandrus, right? In the land of Ilium. Interesting, alright. Okay, let's see. The Ionis provided 100 ships which were equipped from the Greek style, right? The Ionians, these people were originally Pelasgian, right? But the Greeks conquered them, they mixed with them, and then the Ionians started adopting the Greek identity, right? The Ionians were, so they were called Aegelian Pelasgians, right? For the entire period, they were settled in the Peloponnese, which is now called Achaia. But then, after the arrival of the Peloponnese of Donus and Zoltus, they came to be called Ionians after Ion, son of Zoltus, right? So they too were Pelasgian people. They subsequently adopted the name Ionian for the same reason as did the 12 cities of the Ionians, the inhabitants of which would originally came from Athens, right? So they're talking about that there was 12 cities in Athens, and then there was also the 12 cities in the coast of Anatolia. And the reason they have these 12 cities in Anatolia is because the Pelasgian 12 cities in Athens, the Pelasgians came over there, they built the 12 cities in Anatolia to reflect that. The Aeolians contributed 60 ships. They too had Greek equipment and were another people accordingly to the Greek tradition who were originally ranked as Pelasgian, right? And the Hellespontians furnished, as I said, right? They were originally Pelasgian. Showed you earlier about the conquest. They conquered these people. They ethnic cleansed them. Their identity changed because they were ethnically cleansed. The Greek culture was too dominant. The equipment of the Hellespontians of all the more Ionian Dorian colonists was Greek in style, right? Um, let's see. Back when the Pelasgians had possession of what is now called Greece, the Athenians or Pelasgians themselves were known as Carni. Then during the reign of Cecrops, as the Cecropids later when Erechtheus inherited the throne, they changed their name to Athenians, and when Ion, the son of Zoltus, became their warrior, they were called Ionians after him. Right? So Cecrops is one of the very, very earliest kings of Athens, right? And so Cecrops is not a Greek, he's a Pelasgian. This is so Greeks need to stop lying, people need to stop lying. These were not Greeks, right? So let's see. All right, and I guess I'll go through a few more books, right? So let's see. Let's see what if anything is said here. It might not be this one, right? So let's see. Let's go. the ones taking them for a Pelagian army. They were constantly harassed by the Pelasgians for battle with them at each other. The Argonauts slew many. However, the hellenes taking them for a Pelagian army. They were constantly being joined battle with them at the night in mutual ignorance of each other. The Argonauts slew many among the rest, and had on the morning they cut off their heads during a costly burial, and sailed away and touched at Mysia. Right? Interesting, right? So, okay, I didn't even read this part, right? So, Vanilla had by Zeus, and she was the first mortal woman whom Zeus. Okay, Ocean Antiphus had a son, Anocchus, right? Anocchus was one of the early kings, right? Whom, whom a river in Argos is called Anocchus, right? So this river called Anocchus is named after him, right? And he and Milia, daughter of Oceanus, had sons Phoronius and Agellius, right? Agellius having died childless, the whole country was called Agilia, and Phoronis reigning over the land. After onwards, the Peloponnese begat Apis and Neobis by Tiphys Telidus. Apis converted his power into a tyrant named the Peloponnese after himself Apia, but being a stern tyrant, he was conspired again slain by Thexleon and Telchus, right? He left no child after being deemed a god, was called Serapis, right? But Neobis, led by Zeus, she was the first mortal woman whom Zeus cohabited, a son of Argus, which is, but Neobis had by Zeus a son Argus, right? And Argus is why they named the city of Argos after, right? And also say uh, Acusala's son, a son Pelagus, after whom the inhabitants of the Peloponnese were called Pelasgians, right? However, the Hesiod said that Pelasgus was the son of soil, right? Now, when they say that he's a son of soil, they just mean they come from the ground, like they were always there, right? As far as they know, right? But you shouldn't really trust what Hesiod says too much all the time because he says some really weird stuff. He's one of the few authors you can't really trust too much. He kind of probably told grand tales, right, to try to get his reputation up, right? He talked too much about monsters and stuff like that that made no sense. But Argus received the kingdom and called the But Argus received the kingdom called the Peloponnese after himself Argos, as I just said, and having married Evadne, the daughter of Strymon and Nera, and begat Acabus, Pyrrhus, Epidaurus, Cyrus, succeeded the throne, right? So, right, right. Perseus hastened with Danae Andromeda to Argos, right? So this has to do with so the Gorgons were from North Africa, right? So this is in Africa. Andromeda was an Ethiopian queen, right? So Perseus hastened with Danae and Andromeda. The Danaans were from Egypt, right? Perseus hastened with them. Perseus was a local in Egypt before he hastened with the Danae and Andromeda. This is in North Africa to Argos, right? So they migrate to Argos in order to behold to the Acreces, but after learning this and dreading the oracle, forsook Argos and departed to the Pelasgian land. Now Tlepolemus, king of Larissa, was holding the athletic games in honor of his dead father, and Perseus came to compete, and he engaged in Pentalethum, struck Aristeus. So, yeah, king, where was this? So, Now, Tuethemitis is a Pelasgian. Tuethemitis, like I said, is a Albanian name also. He engaged the blah blah blah. Where is it? Oh, okay. Here. Gainus went to wait. After their wander, the Greeks landed and settled in various countries. Wait. When Pelas expelled from the Pythias son of Actimus, the father's kingdom, when Orestes carried off his wife Harmonion, they had previously betrothed them to Troy, and for that reason was slain Orestes of Delphi. After their wanderings, the Greeks landed and settled in various countries. They're talking about the Trojans wandering about, I think. And after their wanderings, the Greeks landed and settled in various countries. Some in Libya, some in Italy, some in Sicily, some in the islands near Iberia, some others in the banks of the Sangarius River, and some settled in Cyprus. And those that were shipwrecked at Capharis, some were drifted in the some way to another. Gaius went to Libya, and Antiphus, son of uh, Thalasus, went to the Pelasgians and have taken possession of the country and called it Thessaly, right? All right, so this is about the time when they conquered the land, the lands from the Pelasgians. Apollodorus. So let's see. All right, so right, and then he called it Thessaly, right? So Antiphus names Thessaly after his father Thessalus, right? But he's a Greek. So Thessaly wasn't always called Thessaly, it was a different name before, and they conquered it from the Pelasgians. Phidippus with the Coans were driven first to Andros and then to Cyprus, and then he settled. Alaphanor died in Troy, but his people were cast away in the Ionian Gulf and inhabited Apollonia and Epirus. Right? So his people were cast away from the Ionian Gulf and Apollonia and Epirus. So Epirus is near the Illyrian territory, right? All the way over there. And the people of Telephonimus touched the Crete. They were driven out and they're cursed by the winds and settled in the Iberian islands, right? So some of the people of Telephemus, um, this man, I'm gonna look him up because this is interesting for me, that they were driven out and they settled in Iberian islands. So they're probably talking about Balearic Islands or Malta, one of these islands. The people of the Protilius were cast away of Pella near the plain of Canistrum. I'm not sure where that. Were driven. Philoctetus near the plain. Were driven to Campania in Italy, and after the making of war, the Lucanians had settled in Crimsa near Croton and Thorium. Right. Croton is a place in mainland Italy. Um, it's around Etruscan territory. Thorium, I'm not sure. In his wanderings, all founded a sanctuary of Apollo. Wanderer also disguised his vow as in his blah blah blah. Right. So so okay. So this is Apollodorus. Now let's see what Polybius says. Right. Let me just double check something. Yeah, it's recording. All right. That would have been sucked if I was All right. So it doesn't really talk about Pelasgian too much. Let me see something. Emathia. Look, the first. This is a side note, right? So Macedonia wasn't really always Macedonian land. It was Paeonian land, right? And Paeonians and Illyrians, they're related. They're related. They're all that. So, and the Paeonians were also against the Greeks during the Trojan Wars. They allied themselves with the Pelasgians. This is important to know. Um, they keep trying to say, "Oh, Trojans were Greeks." Trojans were not Greeks, right? They fought the Hellenic people of Mycenaean Greeks, right? Because they were pro-Hellenic. The Trojans were not, right? And the Paeonians sided with them. So, and the real name of the land, the area was called Amathia, right? So, as you can see, in Amathia, formerly called Paeonia, right? And fill up in the cities, the Thracians and other barbarians, right? So, that's just a side note. Uh, so, there's not really anything about Pelasgians there. Apian. So this is gonna talk about Illyrians. The Greeks call those people Illyrians who occupy the region beyond the Macedonia and Thrace, from Chaeonia and Thesprotia to the river Ister, the Danubian River. And the length of the country it is breadth is from Macedonia to the mountains of Thrace to Pannonia and the Adriatic and the foothills of the Alps, right? So they say that the country received its name from Illyrius, son of Polyphemus, for the Cyclops, the son of Polyphemus. For the Cyclops Polyphemus and his wife Galate had three sons, Celtus, Illyrius, and Gallus, all of whom migrated from Sicily, and the nations called Celts, Illyrians, and Galatians took their origin from them. And many myths prevailing, blah blah. Most plausible, Illyrius had six sons, Ancelius, right? Ancelius is for the tribe of the Ancelians. Illyrius has six sons, Autortorius, right? That's another Illyrian tribe, Dardanus, right? After the Dardanians, Matus, Taurus, Perphebius, and also the Dardapartho, Durithal, the Sorrow, the Dacerades, and from whom sprang the Talanti for the Talantians, right? The Porphyria and the Ancilians, the Taurenses, and the Dardani, the Partheni, the Serdi, the Darci, the Otirius, had a son, Pannonius, right? And Pannonius is the father of, or Paeon, he's the father of the Pannonians, right? So you could see that they're related. The Pannonians are related. They fought on the Trojan side, right? Dardanians, they're Pelasgians actually. Uh, and the Hellespont in Anatolia, right? That's a Pelasgian land. And their founder was Teucer. So Teucer was a Pelasgian. He was a cousin of the Illyrians, right? Let's see. The Trebolians, the Scorticus, right? These are Celts, Travelers. I think they're Celts. Also, I'm not sure. Let's see. The travelers took refuge with the Geti on the other side of the Danube and fought flourishing until the time of Philip of Alexander, right? The Romans had one time fortified a small town among the Equa, which they called after the name of the house of later times. A small town among the Iqui they called Alba, in which they called Alba after the name of their mother city, and its inhabitants, the lapse of time, have become the carelessness of the corruption of the language, or to distinguish them from Albanians who were called Albenses, right? 2,000 of these Albenses hastened to Rome to share the danger, right? But we know that the Albanians are descendants of Illyrians because there's DNA evidence of this, right? So, uh, let's see, Strabo, Xenophon, right? So I think that's gonna be enough. That's pretty sufficient. It might be a little bit boring, might be a little bit dry, but I debunked their claim. I showed you where you were wrong. You were misinterpreting information. You were taking them as the inhabitants who owned Hellas um, were necessarily calling Pelasgian Greeks, right? That's not the same thing, right? They're calling it Pelasgian Argos because the original people of that place were Pelasgians. At his time, he still remembers that the place is a Pelasgian land. At his time, they're still kind of Hellenizing the place, right? Let's see, and that's it.